All right, welcome back to another episode of Path of Purpose. This is episode number 6, and today I'm here with my guest, Drew Ludwick. Drew, thank you so much for just being on the podcast today and being willing to share your story.
Dude, thank you for having me, man. It's always a good time to talk to you, and I'm glad that I was able to, kind of not help you out, but work with you on this, and it's fun.
Yeah, yeah. Would you mind just starting talking a little bit about just um, yourself? How would you describe yourself and your path to where you are right now?
Yeah, sure, man. So how would I describe myself? That's kind of a loaded question, but I'll say I still probably think of myself as a musician above everything else. I was from ages 10 to I guess probably 24 or 25. I was pretty much solely interested in music. I was doing undergrad at first at Berklee College of Music and then second at UGA, and I was very interested in just playing music, first the blues and then jam band kind of stuff. And I was mainly focused on gigging rather than recording or anything. I was a history major in undergrad, so it wasn't, music related necessarily at UGA, but I still played a lot of gigs. And probably, or I guess around the end of, I guess 2021, I would say, yeah, 2021, I started to, I don't want to say experiment, but some doses of psychedelics in combination with music kind of had a big impact on my life in the direction that I was going in. And I had a very intense spiritual experience the first time that I smoked DMT, and that kind of changed the trajectory of my life and what I wanted to do. And it went from me just wanting to play music all the time to me thinking, there may actually be something more here that I've never really thought about. And obviously growing up listening to the Dead and stuff, the psychedelia aspect is in that kind of music, but it was always surface level for me until I had these experiences, and then it showed me that there was something more to everything than just what we think. And that not only opened a lot of creative routes for me, because suddenly I realized that you could meditate a bunch, and then I would hear music, and then I would just write down that music. So it wasn't only creative, but it was also a spiritual side of it that significantly bettered the position that I was in, at least mentally and psychologically. And I think that pretty much anyone who's had one of those experiences can relate to that, probably, because I don't think that you necessarily have those kind of experiences until you're at a point where you're very low and you need something to change the way that you see things. And, call it a gift from God or just luck. But the trip that I got was not the trip that I wanted. It was the trip that I needed. And it changed what I was interested in. And through that, I then decided to go back to get my master's, which is how I met you. And it, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a complete 180, but it's definitely very different from what I was interested in during undergrad and for the large portion of my life prior to these experiences. So I would say I'm mainly a musician, quasi-mystic maybe, hopefully one day, and just trying to figure out what's going on. And
Mm,
yeah.
there's so much there to unpack.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I kind of just started going off.
So how old were you when you had this experience?
So it would have been December of 2021, so I would have been 25. I had just turned 25 a few months earlier than that, and I had been living in LA with a buddy and playing in a band with him, and some you know artistic differences and all that kind of stuff happened, and there's no bad blood or anything, but I ended up in a position where I kind of was just looking, what do I do next? And I had read all that stuff, the Roland Griffiths, Johns Hopkins study about how psychedelics, psilocybin mushrooms can change people's beliefs and cause a lot of improvement in their depression symptoms and all that kind of stuff. So I was like, this might be worth a shot. And it didn't fail me.
So at the time you had already, so can you walk me through just like a timeline of, you went to UGA for how many years?
Yeah. Sorry, man. I totally flew through that. I went to Berkeley for 2 years, and then I went to UGA for 2.5 years.
Okay. So you started your undergrad at Berkeley and then transferred and finished at UGA?
Yeah, correct. I went to Berkeley and I met a lot of cool people. I had a lot of interesting experiences, but it just wasn't the right fit for me. And I am originally from Atlanta, so I thought, I'm going to just apply to transfer to UGA. If I get in, I'm just going to transfer and go there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the route that my life took. And it caused me to play a lot more gigs, which was very nice because I don't want to say UGA was easier, but I didn't necessarily have to devote as much time as you do at music school. And also music school kind of sucks the fun out of music because it's no longer you're jamming. It's you have to do this, you have to do that, and it's just no fun, man.
So what were those 3 years after you graduated UGA like before your psychedelic experience at 25?
Yeah. So I graduated in December of 2019, and we played a big gig at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And then COVID hit, and it was like everything that the trajectory that I thought that I was going on was suddenly just gone because there was no live music or anything like that. And I had a buddy, my old roommate from Berkeley, my buddy Yanni. I decided to go live with him in LA, and we just lived together and we're just jamming every single day during COVID. And I mean, that is kind of the ideal musician life, when you can just jam all day, and it was very nice. And I think that it helped a lot, especially get my chops down. But LA during COVID was kind of tough, and it definitely was not great for my mental health, I guess. So it was pretty dark at the end. Towards the end of 2021, I was just unhappy at my place in life and just everything. I wasn't that unhappy, but I was just unhappy, It's especially during COVID, during the lockdowns when you couldn't really do anything. It was kind of depressing, man. And so I would say that in between from having graduated UGA to then enrolling in the MSc program, it was not tough per se, but it wasn't easy, I guess. And although there were a lot of good moments there, it was not what I thought it was going to be, I guess. Which, the Buddha says expectation leads to suffering, man. And I was expecting something different than what I got, and that's, I think, what caused me to feel that kind of way, maybe.
So what was this? You played at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame?
Yeah. So it was a very random encounter, actually. When we were playing a gig at UGA, and there just happened to be some celebrities there, and they were at a frat party after a football game, and then they just started talking to us and were like, hey, do you want to come play this gig? And of course, I will play any gig, first of all, but playing at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is cool, man. So we obviously said yes, and we went up there, and it was December of 2019. I think I skipped my graduation to fly up to Cleveland to play that. And but yeah, I don't necessarily tell a lot of people about that because it feels kind of braggy, and that's not the intent of that. I just mean to say that there was almost like playing at that place was a lifelong dream of mine, I guess. Ever just from growing up, because you see all the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, all the inductees, all these people, you see, like the Beatles, Stevie Ray Vaughan, all the greats, man, and to just have the chance to even be in the same room as their equipment and stuff was huge for me. And it gave me a lot of confidence in my own playing that then COVID took away because suddenly you couldn't play anywhere. And I was like, what am I doing all this for? But
so was this with a band that you formed at UGA?
Yes, but I actually did not form this band. I just joined it. I met the guys that were playing in the band at another gig when I was playing with another band, actually. And they asked me if I was interested to play with them. And of course, they were chill guys. So, of course, I'm down to play with anybody. So that was it was a lot of fun to play with them. My buddies, Peter, Mackenzie, Brett, and Ben. And, those days when you're playing with your college buddies, man, it never gets better than that.
Yeah. So were those like originals that you guys were playing?
It was mainly covers.
Okay.
We had some originals that were written at the time, but we never, not as a band, individually, we had songs that were written, especially Mackenzie and myself, but we never played them as a band necessarily because all the COVID stuff. I guess I joined that band in April of 2019, so we weren't playing together that long before COVID hit, and then that kind of derailed everything. And then once I was across the country, we didn't play as much together. But we still get together and play every once in a while when there's a gig going in Athens or something like that.
Wow. So you were at this point where you guys were playing that gig, and then COVID happens, and then you just don't play with each other on a consistent basis anymore?
Yeah, and part of it was I had planned to go live with my Berkeley roommate in LA prior to this, before COVID even happened. That had been the plan because I also was in a band with him, and that was more of the kind of style that at that time I was going for. It was more of a power trio, Cream or like Jimi Hendrix. And so it was one part COVID that we didn't get together, and just another part that I was just living on the other side of the country.
Yeah.
But then anytime I would come back to Georgia, we would obviously play together. And still to this, we play a few gigs a year, just get together and play. But as everyone's gotten older, my buddy Mackenzie has started releasing his own stuff. And then I was making music by myself, and it's kind of crazy to think about how different everybody's life went after COVID, but who knows what is the cause of that, because it could have happened anyway.
Yeah. Wow. So then now, being at the point of when you had that psychedelic experience at 25, how did that shift your playing as a musician?
That's a very interesting question, man. It definitely opened me up to more possibilities and more ideas, because I think a lot of times as a musician or as a guitar player, you kind of get stuck in a rut of you have a certain bag of licks that you're used to using, and obviously to some extent every show will always be different, but I was probably relying too much on stuff that I had already learned instead of pushing myself to continue to grow as a musician and learn new styles of music, primarily Indian classical actually, and jazz and that kind of stuff. But for me, when I did the psychedelics, I had a huge, all of a sudden, just a huge love for Indian classical music, and the different scales that they use in the microtones was very interesting to me, and it was really inspiring because you don't hear that a lot in Western music. So suddenly it felt like I understood a whole different genre of music, and how it could also be incorporated into jamming or Southern rock and that kind of stuff. Because even Duane Allman, and if you look at some of the stuff that he did at the Fillmore on Mountain Jam, there's a few Indian type licks, and Derek Trucks is hugely inspired by Indian classical music. Qawwali as well, which is Sufi music. And then I started to hear that, and it seeped into my playing, maybe unconsciously, not necessarily I was trying to do that, but obviously not to the point where it sounded like I was playing Indian classical music, but just a hint here or there. And it just, I think that it opened up a lot of possibilities, sonic possibilities, and just recognizing that you don't necessarily have to fit in this box that is put on you. You can cross over genres, and if it makes people feel good and it sounds good, then it's good, and that's all that matters.
What do you feel like that box was for you before you broke out of it?
Oh, it was for sure blues. I grew up really loving blues music. Obviously the 60s blues guys, Clapton, that kind of stuff, but even Delta blues, Son House, Robert Johnson, those are, to me, when I was growing up, it didn't get better than that. You would hear those guys playing on a dobro, and it touches a part of your soul that pop music doesn't touch, for me at least. And obviously everyone's different, so that was just my personal preference. But over years of doing that, I for sure was in a rut with blues playing, and I needed to expand.
Yeah. Huh. Wow. Did you feel like after that experience it was clear what you needed to do in order to grow?
Yes and no, I would say, because when I had this experience, actually, it kind of, I guess, as we've learned from school, I think that I was having a spiritual emergency, as it were, because I had a really hard time contextualizing it initially, because it was like suddenly I saw all this like religious imagery and stuff that I necessarily had never thought of, and all of a sudden you're just confronted with it, and it felt to me that I was being told to let it go, let the ego die, and just become a conduit to the music. And because a lot of the time, I think when you're jamming, you run the risk of overthinking, and when your mind's involved, you're limiting what can come out, because you're thinking, was that good? Did I play that right? So to me, I think that the experience that I had made me think, who cares? Just let it all go. Just play what comes out, and if it's good, people will like it. If it's not good, people won't like it, and I'll get better the next time. And there's no sense in worrying about, because I also think that's another part of being a musician, is you're always overly critical about your playing and stuff. And I think that there was almost a sense of just kind of be easy on yourself, because you compare yourself to all these great guitar players, and it's like, I'm only 25. I've been playing for a set number of years. These guys have been playing for 50 years. Of course they're going to be better. But yeah, I think that it just the openness to new stuff, especially, and just learning to kind of take yourself out of the equation and look at it almost objectively, and just, the theory of the flow states, and just let it come out. It felt like that's what I was being told, I guess.
Hmm. So when in this process did you start to write your own music? And for those listening, Drew just released a new song about, what was it, a month ago?
Yeah, it was several months ago now. I think probably in March, maybe.
It's called Sweet Mary Jane on Spotify and music platforms.
Yeah. So I guess I had been writing music for a long time, but for the majority of the time, it was just very simple. I mean, Sweet Mary Jane also is just a very simple song. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that that is complicated or complex or anything, but I had been writing music for a very long time, but nothing that I was really ever happy with.
Hmm.
When I was living in LA, my buddy and I were actually working on an album, writing an album, and then as things kind of fell through, it didn't feel right for me to record the music that I'd written with somebody else, and take it.
Hmm.
So it was after that experience I was thinking I need to write about this stuff and the
Hmm.
more, I guess, spiritual side of it. And that the song that you referenced, Sweet Mary Jane, that one was written several years ago, so that's not necessarily part of this uh, after experience writing. But the rest of the music that I've been working on that will soon be out there is that kind of stuff. And
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it for me at least when I was in the and especially with meditation, man, meditation and psychedelics combined, I would hear things in my head and then I would come out and I would notate via, my phone recording or something, the melody that I was hearing, and then I would just meditate on it and eventually the words would come. And
Well,
I mean, I'm not saying they're good, but they can.
I'm excited to hear this when this comes out.
Yeah, I think that you'll like it more probably than the other one, man, because it's more along the lines of the stuff that we look at in school and
Mm.
consciousness and spiritual
Yeah.
stuff.
Also, just the process that you're talking about, it sounds like you're doing, like you're allowing it to come through you almost rather than like muscling through it with like a production team to create something and sell something.
Yeah, which it's yes, and which in my head is better musically, but definitely is not better to get gigs because I have no business mind at all,
Mm.
and I'm not thinking about like how am I going to let me write a song so I can get a gig or something. It's more of I saw something really weird in this meditation, I'm gonna write about it. And then
Yeah.
if people like it, they like it. If they don't, eventually they may understand what I'm saying,
Mm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's almost like, because you can like tell the difference when you're listening to something that's been like put together in a studio without any heart and soul versus like something being like coming through somebody. And like really, I feel like that's when it really like gives you the shivers or touches your soul or heart, you know? And
Yeah.
like even if it doesn't get you gigs, it's like maybe not right away, you know? But like at what point are you willing to compromise like your art for just getting like a quick gig?
That's a very good point, man. And I agree with you on that for sure. I think that if you are honest in your work and you demonstrate that it's from the heart, I guess, or it's you're just becoming a conduit for the music, people eventually will respond to it. People that are receptive to that kind of stuff, because there's obviously people that aren't into that music, and that's totally fine. Everyone has their own preferences, but if you're really touched by human emotion and that kind of stuff, I think that that style of music definitely is better for touching the soul than a pop song. But
Yeah.
that's perhaps because I'm coming from a different angle.
Yeah. So how do you see, and for those of you who are listening, Drew and I met because we're in the same master's program, but how do you see this master's program being a part of your journey as an artist?
That's a good question too, man. So I think definitely the master's program has helped me as an artist in the sense that I think, much more grounded as a person now than I was a few years ago. And I'm just a lot more open to different things now than I was a few years ago. And I think that those traits are very desirable in an artist or a musician because you can't expect you can't be unwilling to change around different styles of music or other players because the vibes that you get playing are going to be different every single time. It's never the exact same. And I think that the master's program and the especially I'm not sure what you did the psychotherapy modules, right? I did the creative ones, and that we focused a lot on flow states, and that has been very helpful for me because deliberately entering a flow state is not necessarily something that is easy, but it becomes easier with practice. And I think that as I've learned, different meditation techniques or different things like that, it has helped me get into that flow state. Primarily in live settings when you're jamming or something. It's not really the same for me when I'm recording because I hate it and it's just not fun. But live wise, I think that it's helped a lot. And also just the stuff that we've learned about consciousness, the approaches to consciousness module has been very helpful to me because I stopped necessarily taking myself so seriously as a person and recognizing that, yourself as the witness of what's going on and seeing how you can harness that to create something. And it's obviously it's different for everyone. So my process is not going to be the same as anybody else's. And it's probably very strange for many people, but it has worked for me at least. And I think it has. And I am going to continue to do it.
Yeah. And for those of you who are listening who are probably like, what the hell type of master's program is this? It's a master's of science in consciousness studies, spirituality, and transpersonal psychology.
Yeah, I probably should have prefaced that. I'm sorry. Yeah. And I was talking about the module options. I was going up pretty deep. I forget that not everybody is aware of what we do. So
Yeah.
But I think also, man, just the research that we did this past year has been helpful too, because you look at the experiences that I've had with psychedelics and how it changed my life, and then you look at, we studied many people who have had very similar experiences, and they all seem to be more open to new experiences, which I think is, you don't necessarily need psychedelics to be like that. And I think that the course also is just teaching you to be open to new things. Because when I started the course, I thought that I was like still pretty material paradigm, like consciousness is derived from material processes in the brain. And now I'm the exact opposite. So I think just being open-minded is very helpful, not only in music, but just life in general.
Yeah. Yeah. What drew you to the program?
Yeah, man. So I guess I initially was very interested in the psychedelics aspect of it, and I randomly was watching a TV show, and David Luke was on it, and I was looking up.
Yeah. It froze. But I can hear you again. For those of you who are listening,
I'm
Drew
back.
just
Okay, there we go.
reconnected.
Sorry.
Good.
My computer was dying. I had to plug it in. So yeah, my bad, man.
No, you're
I
good.
wasn't expecting it to take. It was fully charged, but it's going fast. So yeah. The thing that I guess drew me initially was the psychedelics aspect, and I saw that David Luke was the teacher, and I had seen something that he did, and I was very intrigued by it. And I read the DMT Entities book, and it was just very interesting to me because I wanted to see why it is that this stuff happens, because it wasn't just happening to me. A lot of people that smoke DMT see the same kind of things, and
Yeah.
I thought that was super interesting, and I wanted to learn more about that. And then once I actually got to the course, I then realized there's a lot more than just the psychedelics aspect of it, and there's a lot of stuff here, and the psychedelics portion is just one side of it, and there's a whole there are spiritual techniques to get you into the same altered states, and then that, I guess, became sort of my focus was meditation techniques or chanting or that kind of stuff. And it's interesting because there are a lot of parallels between the psychedelic experience and that. And as Westerners, we have a very rigid society, I guess, where you don't have necessarily the time to meditate 6 or 8 hours a day every day. And for somebody in that position, psychedelics can be very helpful at accessing these states when you don't have the time to put into meditation techniques. But it's not the only way, and it's not necessarily the best way. It just depends on your temperament and your personality and what appeals to you. So yeah, it was initially for me the psychedelics part of it, but then it quickly changed to the spiritual side within 1 or 2 months of being in the course.
Wow. That's interesting. I feel like for me too, like the reason of why I joined was different than the reason of why I was still there a year in, or a year and a half in, or 2 years in.
Really?
For sure. Yeah.
And yeah, I would imagine, man, especially with your work as being a doula, a death doula, that I mean, that's like the most hands-on training that you can get basically for this kind of stuff, because you're around it all the time. And I respect it, man. I props to you, and I think that you're doing a lot of good for the world, man, by doing that. And one day I'm gonna be volunteering there too, man.
Yeah, if you come to Austin, I can get you hooked up.
I appreciate it, man.
Yeah. But my reason also, like with that, I didn't even start working with dying people until I was 6 months into the program. Like that wasn't something I
Wow.
was doing before.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I originally joined the program because I had one psychedelic experience, and I just like it opened my eyes to seeing that there was more to the world than just what I was aware of. And for that, it like piqued my curiosity and wanting to just learn more about it and see what's out there. And also to like learn about how to communicate these experiences and how to like talk about what these experiences are. And I at the time I had just moved to Austin. I was working at an event production startup, and like it was cool. It was like it was paying me well, and there were a bunch of cool benefits to working there, and got to work with a bunch of cool people. But at the same time, I felt like there was more there was more that I needed to be doing, and more that I felt that I needed to do. And with my dad, he passed away like maybe a year and a half before that. And for me, like hospice was something that was always close to my heart. And it was around that time where my contract was up with that company, and I was like, this is what I wanted to do. Like I got it like lined up and ready to go. And once my contract was done, I just started working with this hospice company. I started as a volunteer and just visiting patients. I started with like one or two patients, and then for a year I was visiting like maybe like five or six a week, and just sitting down and just like having conversations with them and asking questions and just hearing about their lives. And yeah, but I feel like the program really played a big part in yes, that cultivating that openness to seeing that there was more out there for me, and more out there than what I was just doing. And I felt like by like just going to this job and working like whatever 7 hours a day and coming home and working out, it just felt like it wasn't fulfilling, and it felt like there was more that like I needed to be doing.
Yeah, man, I think that is a very common thing for people after psychedelic experiences, because I felt the same way when I had mine, and I kind of thought, am I doing music for the wrong reasons? Am I doing it even because I like it, or am I doing it because I am doing it for a job and I just want to get
Mm,
paid because that's the only thing that I'm technically proficient at or whatever.
yeah.
So that kind of played a part for me as well. But you raise a good point, man. With I think that a lot of people that came to the course or to psychedelics in general have personal or a family member who went through something very tragic, and that plays a role in spiritual development, I think.
Mm,
Which I know sounds really kind of weird, that your spiritual, not you necessarily, a general you, but that somebody would progress spiritually after something horrible like that happens. And I mean, it was similar kind of to me when I watched my grandparents in hospice, man, and it like had a
mhm,
profound impact on me. But obviously a grandparent is not a parent, and I think that by your experiencing that, man, you have the ability to transfer that kindness and stuff to people in hospice care that
mm,
need somebody, because a lot of times, man, people aren't paying attention to them, and people are not, I mean, obviously they have nurses and stuff, but it's sad. And somebody who has experience and is spiritually centered is in a position where they can provide good care to somebody like this, or just moral support, or you like, I remember you're into holding space, and that is a big thing for people in hospice care, man. So I agree with everything you said, man. There's a lot of wisdom in there.
yeah. 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 Cool. I want to get back to you
No,
too.
yeah, sorry.
No,
I was
no,
getting I'm
not at
getting off
all.
track because I'm not used to talking about myself
Yeah.
at length. So it's I kind of like to throw the ball back at you, but
No, yeah, please do.
I
Also, if you have questions or like please, yeah. Like primarily it's about you, but I think if things come up and we want to talk about experiences and see if we have had similar experiences, then yeah, I think it's important to like open that dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely, man. But it's your podcast, man, so you direct me however you see fit.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. Um, Talk about the monastery and the how you wanting to partake in that, how that came up during your academic journey.
Yeah. So I don't actually think that I mentioned that, but as Jason is alluding to, as school progressed, I became more and more interested in the spiritual side, which I mentioned briefly earlier, but I started to read a lot of treatises on spirituality. I was very influenced by Vedanta, primarily non-dual Vedanta, and I started reading Shankaracharya and Ramakrishna Vivekananda, and it made sense to me because the experience that I had when I had smoked DMT, I was watching the cosmos be created by a dancing god with 8 arms,
Mm.
and I saw it all emerge from a formless ether. And when I was reading these accounts, of the non-dual saints, when they talk about how the world appears in and through consciousness, it really made a lot of sense to me because I had seen that happen in my experience. So I started to get more and more interested in this, and I just started to read a bunch of books, and I eventually befriended a monk, Brother Shankara, uh, in Atlanta when I was studying for one of our presentations on Stan Groff, because he was very heavily influenced by Advaita as well. And I just went to his place and started asking him questions. And at the time, he was in a retirement home, which was beneficial for me because he couldn't leave when I had all these questions for him. Yeah. So I would just ask him, the most ridiculous questions, like, what does Vedanta say about aliens? Or and he humored me through all of it. And he was a big part of my spiritual journey, and getting to the place where I, decided I actually am going to apply to live with these people and see if, that goes through. And he encouraged me to apply. It wasn't just an unprompted thing, but I really enjoyed the conversations, just the philosophical talks that I had with him. And it's very interesting to me, that whole spiritual side, because I guess I grew up Catholic and I was baptized and confirmed Catholic, but I think that I mistakenly thought that religion was just a faith-based thing, where if you read, the accounts of the Desert Fathers or the early church fathers, it's very clearly an experiential thing, because Evagrius says that you can see God and all this stuff, and that is what Vedanta says and Sri Ramakrishna says. And I started to piece together a lot of the accounts of the mystics and saw that there's a lot of similarities in all of the accounts, regardless of the religion. And I started to just become really interested in it, and I wanted to learn as much as I could, and that drew me to the monk Brother Shankara. And then he, referred me to a bigger group of monks that live in a monastery in California. But unfortunately, he passed away before I was able to apply to live with them. So I'm just doing it in his honor. But I'm hoping that is something that can come to fruition, because I think that living amongst a group of monks would be very beneficial for me.
Mm. So did you apply?
Yeah, well, so Bethany just emailed me back that she would send my recommendation. She just emailed me yesterday, so I'm sending it all off for August. So we'll see what happens, man.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried though, because one part of me thinks that I'm gonna love it, and then I'm not gonna want to come back to school, and then I'm not gonna want to go back to music because, but you know, there's a whole part in the Bhagavad Gita where Arjuna tells Krishna that he wants to become a monk,
Mm.
and Krishna tells him that's not your duty. Your duty is to be a warrior. So a
Mm.
lot of it is, I on one hand, I think that would be a very enjoyable experience, and that's what I want to do. But on the other hand, what am I supposed to do? So that's
Yeah.
something that's something that must be meditated upon.
Yeah. It's like a fork in the road of like what is my purpose versus what do I want to experience.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think the a monastic program where you can live with them for 6 weeks or something like that, which I would be applying to, is something that is a nice in between where you're not necessarily devoting your entire life to it.
Mhm.
You can go and experience it. If you like it, then once you're done with school, you can do it full time. There's no pressure. You can leave at any time, but I may go and I may hate it, or
Yeah.
they may not accept me at all. Who knows? And if there may be a reason that it's happening the way that it does. Well, I mean, there is a reason that it's happening the way that it is, because
Mm.
even though it may not make sense in the moment, it's the way that it was supposed to be.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, it's definitely tough to remind yourself that, because it's hard, man. But I guess one of the tenets of Vedanta is non-attachment, and not just to things or people, but to the results of your actions and the fruits of your labors,
Mm.
which is really hard in music, because you spend all this time working on something,
Yeah.
then when you're done and somebody doesn't like it, you're like, oh, and that hurts. But who cares? You worked on it. The working on it is the gift, and the
Yeah.
gift is to just do that. And then once you're done
Mm.
with it, who cares? And
Yeah.
yeah, it's like
Yeah. It's like it's loving the process and not the product.
exactly, man, because the process is the point. It's
Yeah.
That's just like in when they talk about enlightenment or whatever, the journey is the goal. That's the end goal. It's not a specific point where you have an experience or something. It's just getting on the spiritual journey is the goal itself. And
Yeah.
it's hard to remind yourself that, though, because we live in a very result driven world, where if
Mm.
you put something out and it doesn't have the result that you want, it is depressing, and it makes you feel
Yeah.
bad about yourself. But I think that as long as you're, like you said, you love the process and you're doing it, that's what it should be all about, man.
Yeah. A tree with no roots will surely be tumbled over in a storm.
I like that. That's a good one.
Yeah. Wow. So when do you hear back from the monastery? Like when will you know if that's something that's in your path?
So the only guidelines for it are that you're supposed to apply 4 weeks before you want to go.
Mhm.
And so I would be applying for beginning or mid August. So my application will officially be there at the beginning of July, or
Mhm.
a little bit after that, and then they just call you, I guess, if you are accepted, or
Mm.
call you to interview you. But the guy who runs it is coming to the Atlanta Center in July, so I probably will meet him there, because I go, and I met the last one who told me, who to send it off to. So we'll see, man. Nothing may come of it, and if that's the case, that's totally fine. It's There's always, I mean, also when you think about it, it's a research year this year coming up, so technically you could probably apply for any time during the school year, because
Mm.
you don't necessarily have to be there, because it's an online program, right? We don't have to be anywhere in particular.
Mhm.
But it also begs the question of, what is the research project going to be? If you do something involving monks, it would be interesting, I think. So we'll see.
Mm. Wow. Cool, dude. Yeah. What do you think, like, are there specific topics that come to mind of what you want to do your research on?
Yeah, so I've been thinking, man, I am interested in if you were to take a group of monks or a group of spiritual aspirants who are trained in a very particular meditation technique, and there's this thing called the non-dual awareness scale, and if you get them to fill that out in the MEQ, and then you compare it with jam musicians who are entering into flow states, because there's been some literature about how flow states are similar to non-dual states. And as somebody who is both a musician and interested in spiritual techniques, in my experience, the states are fairly similar, but a bigger quantifiable, something that can be quantified where you can see the results and how they compare, and then add a qualitative aspect where you can delve into the actual lived experience of it. I think that would be interesting. I asked Bethany about it, and she said that it's a topic that could be done, but we'll see, man.
She said, "We'll see, man."
No, that's me.
Yeah. So it sounds like you'd be doing a mixed methods then.
Oh yeah, I would prefer to do mixed methods, man. I don't think I can do purely qualitative. I really did not enjoy the interview process that we did. I mean, I liked the guy at all. He was a very nice guy, but that lady that I was initially supposed to interview who just ghosted us, I don't want to do that again, man. It was stressful for me. But I think that if you combine the two, it would give you a better insight into the experience itself, because you can quantify it all you want, but until you have actual descriptions of what it's like, you're never going to really know. And also, my experience of at the peak of meditation could certainly be different from somebody else, or somebody that's trained in a different technique. So it would be interesting to get into the nitty-gritty of that and kind of see what that is like. My initial one was, I wonder what it would be like if you compared monks' meditation techniques with just random people who did psychedelics and then had a non-dual experience, and see if those are compatible. But I'm leaning more towards the musician stuff. I've been going through a huge Jerry Garcia phase, so I was like, oh, that guy did a ton of drugs when he was playing guitar. I need to do jam musicians.
Yeah. Cool, dude. All right. Well, we hit all my questions.
Yeah, okay, man. Thank you so much for having me, dude. Sorry, the beginning I kind of
No need to apologize.
Yeah, this is my first time ever being on a podcast.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you for doing this, man. There's a lot of interesting stuff in here. You don't have enough people that are talking about this kind of stuff, in my opinion. And I mean, it's nice to talk about music, because I haven't been considering myself a musician for a while. Really, I've been, once you get into the monk kind of grind, then it's like the music fades to the background. But once we're on school break, it's kind of been the opposite. So it's nice to find a balance between the two, man.
Yeah, dude. Thank you for taking the time and talking about your experiences.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for taking the time to, interview and ask me to do this. Honestly, man, I never in a million years would I've ever thought that I'd be on a podcast, but for you, dude, for my boy, anything, man.